Good evening. I think we can start at 6:10 as we wait for others to join. Good evening, everyone. I'm sorry, I was trying to contact our moderator for today, Joshua, to put the session in Facebook Live, but I'm not able to reach out to him. So I think we can start the session because we are quorum. I will be your moderator before Joshua joins Katile Mutuku. And today we are having our session 24 of our training building healthy mother and child training, which is our last topic on mental health. And our speaker today is Samoina WANGUI, who is the founder of Postpartum Depression Kenya. She's a Perinatal Mental HealthCertified and continues to use her skills to support mothers and their families. And as you see, she's from Postpartum Depression Kenya, and she'll be taking us through perinatal mood disorders and psychosis. So thank you so much for joining in time, and welcome our speaker, Samoina WANGUI.
Hi everyone, good evening. I hope I'm audible. Someone
Yes.
Please let me know. Okay, thanks. So I think I'm just going to jump right into it and make my presentation. I should be able to share my screen, isn't it, Katile?
Yes, yes.
Okay, give me a minute. I think my screen should be visible to everyone.
Yeah, I can see it.
Someone please let me know if my screen is visible. Okay, thank you. So let me just get rid of this. So my presentation is on perinatal mood disorders and psychosis, and I'm just going to go slide by slide and share the information that I've gotten together for this presentation. So like Atile said, my name is Samoina, and I am a perinatal mental health advocate. If these terms are new to you, I'll definitely be getting address. So I'm a perinatal mental health advocate, and I founded Postpartum Depression Kenya after my experience with postpartum depression. So I think a good place for us to begin is this quote that I once had during a past training, and it stuck with me. It's by a lady called Jabina Coleman. She's a lactation therapist in the States, and she says, everyone wants to hold a baby, but who will hold a mother? I'd like us to think about that for a second, and just to also contextualize it in our day-to-day lives as we interact with mothers and families. It's very common for us to say, when you've had someone has gotten a baby, we always want to find out, how is the baby? Are they feeding? Are they sleeping? Are they okay? But rarely do we have the same enthusiasm for the mom. And after this presentation, I think we'll be able to, again, put this in context and see why it is important to, care for both the baby and the mother. So this quote just speaks to me quite a bit. Everyone wants to hold the baby, but who will hold the mother? So just a brief breakdown of what we'll be looking at during this short presentation. I outlined my slides and tried to group them in topics. So the first topic is just a brief history of perinatal psychology, some of the terms used in perinatal mental health, myths around pregnancy and motherhood, PMADs. And again, I'm going to get into these definitions and some of these abbreviations a little later. So don't worry if you're just hopping into the call right now. I'm thinking you should be able to catch up. So then treatment options, as well as a place of support and awareness as far as perinatal mood disorders are concerned. I'm sorry, I went back to the previous slide. So what is the objective of this training? What do we want to be able to, at the end of it, what should you be getting out of it? And I thought a good objective would be to have an understanding of the changes that women go through during the perinatal period, and also to be able to know how it affects the mind. Again, we'll get into all these details in the next couple of slides. So I thought maybe a good place to start would just be to understand the history of perinatal psychology, and just to see how far we've come, or what the journey has been like as far as this field of psychology is concerned. So it's a bit fascinating to know that back, in 460 BC, there's something called a puerperal fever. And this is a term that Hippocrates came up with. And he described that at the time, mothers who were delivering at that time, he observed that quite a number of them experienced a lot of agitation, a lot of mania, and delirium. At this time, they didn't have a name for it. They didn't have a term, to classify what we now know as postpartum depression and other maternal mental illnesses. But it was interesting to see some of these aspects that now we know as the symptoms of maternal mental illness. Fast forward to the 19th century, and a guy called Louis Victor Massé studied psychiatric disorders affecting women during and after pregnancy. And he's credited with creating a foundation for what we know today, for a lot of what we know today as far as the psychology of mothers is concerned. So he realized that moms during and after pregnancy, a number of moms are affected, and he was curious, and this sort of formed the basis of what we know today. So in the 20th century, we had Dr. James Alexander Hamilton, and he's often referred to as the father of postpartum psychiatric illness. And he's best known for his approach, and his model was he really advocated for the research, the treatment, and the role that support played for mothers with a mental health condition during and after pregnancy. So his angle just didn't look at what these moms were suffering. His angle also covered like the research. So why are they feeling the way they're feeling? Why do some moms, why are they not able to bond with their babies? Why do some moms get into a psychotic episode and some don't? So he advocated for the research and the treatment. So recognizing that this indeed was like an illness, like, how someone can get diabetes or cancer. So the research, the treatment, and most importantly, the role that support plays for mothers with a mental health condition during and after pregnancy. So that's just a very condensed history of perinatal psychology as we know it today. Also, maybe just to throw this out there, if I'm too fast, I'm not able to see the chat messages as I go. So if I'm too fast, please feel free to, to let me know. But I hope, I hope everyone can follow through as I'm doing this. So then the next slide, we are looking at understanding the terms that are used in perinatal mental health. So among the first slides that I talked about PMADs, PMADS. So what are these? What do they entail? What does it mean? We're going to get into that shortly, just to be able to understand. When we say perinatal mental health, what is perinatal? What are all these abbreviations for? So then I created this slide that is very simplified just to help us, all of us understand. So what are PMADs? Because the truth is, it's not just postpartum depression. Many of us might be familiar with postpartum depression, or PPD as it's commonly abbreviated, but you'd be, it would be nice for all of us to know that beyond postpartum depression, there are quite a number of other illnesses. So PMADs are like an entire spectrum that covers the different maternal mental illnesses that moms can face during pregnancy and after. So during this presentation, you'll hear me talk a lot about perinatal. So what exactly is perinatal? What does it mean? And the definition for this is the time period between pregnancy and 1 year after birth. So perinatal is, to do with moms and babies. So perinatal now covers between pregnancy and 1 year after birth. Postpartum, the term that we use here is post is after and partum is birth. So postpartum is after birth, but we're looking at not just conditions that occur after birth, but also those that occur during pregnancy. So we use perinatal because it's an all-encompassing definition or words. So between pregnancy and 1 year after birth. And again, maybe just to highlight, why are we looking at pregnancy? It's because we realize that during pregnancy, and after birth, there are a lot of hormonal changes that women will typically go through. So whether you're looking at pregnancy and the progesterone levels, or you're looking at after birth and then those progesterone levels dip and oxytocin peaks as the mother is breastfeeding, or whether you're looking at weaning when the baby is just starting to get solid, we're looking at that fluctuation of hormones and just the entire period and how intense it can be. So perinatal is, again, for those who are joining us right now, I just saw that we're now live on Facebook. So I don't know if they're gonna cut the recording prior to that, but I think I'll just continue to go through that again. Perinatal means we're looking at terms that are used in perinatal mental health, and I don't know how to get rid of this. anyway, terms that I used in perinatal mental health, and we had just covered P. So for the PMADs, what are PMADs? So P is perinatal, and I was saying perinatal covers the period between pregnancy and 1 year after birth. Then the M in this entire spectrum is an abbreviation for mood. So when we talk about mood, this is basically how someone feels, and we realize that a number of mental illnesses will affect our mood, will affect how we feel or how we process our emotions. So then some disorders under this particular family include depression, bipolar, and psychosis. And we're going to get into that in a couple of slides. Then we have anxiety. So the A is for anxiety. And some of the disorders or conditions that come under anxiety include OCD. Again, we'll look at this in full, but OCD, panic, and PTSD. Then we have disorder. So when you're talking about a PMAD, what the D is for disorder, which means this is a condition that, this is a condition that affects a mother's daily living, or a mom whose mood is affected, who's suffering from anxiety. It affects them so much so that they're not able to, carry on with their day-to-day activities. So that's what we mean by disorder. So that's just a brief definition. I hope it's clear for everyone, or at least simplified enough for us to be able to follow through this presentation. So that's PMADs. So I thought it's important to share that PMADs do not discriminate, because we might have this assumption, and I know this has been covered in prior presentations, that mental health conditions do not discriminate. Like, anyone can get them, doesn't matter what age, what social status, your religion, what income level, whether you're a celebrity. I'm sorry about that. But yeah, I was saying PMADs do not discriminate. Anyone can get a PMAD regardless of their age, their social status, their religion, their education level, their income level. And I also thought just to highlight this, and we've seen local celebrities open up about their experiences with, most notably, postpartum depression. We've had Chemutai Sage is a local musician who's, shared her experience following the birth of her daughter and realizing that she just couldn't enjoy life anymore. Corazon Kwamboka has most recently shared the same with her firstborn. Wanja Kavengi, many of you might be familiar with her story because it really went viral. She shared some of the struggles she had with her son after getting her son, as well as Diana Marua. She's also spoken about her postpartum depression experience. And globally, we've had Serena Williams, who had a couple of medical complications, and that sort of just made it a bit hard for her to cope, from what she shared with global agencies. We've also had Adele and Chrissy Teigen. And the reason I'm bringing this up is for us to know and to realize that mental health conditions really don't care. When you look at it, some of these celebrities, from where we sit, look like they have it all together. But again, that's the thing with mental health. Anyone can get a mental health condition because it just doesn't discriminate, and it doesn't choose. So on to the next slide. I hope I'm going at an easy pace for all of us to understand and to just follow through. So I highlighted PMADs in Kenya, and I indicated that sadly, and I believe this is also just for mental health, as a broad topic, but we don't have official statistics on the prevalence of maternal mental health in Kenya. That means in Kenya, we cannot say for sure that 1 in X number of women, suffer from a mental health condition, but research shows us that about 20% of women in low and middle income countries such as Kenya will suffer PMAD. So a PMAD. So 20%, that means approximately 1 in 5 women. So for every 5 moms that for every 5 pregnant women and new mothers that there's a chance that one of them will suffer PMAD, any of the conditions that we've mentioned. So in my case, I remember I was the 1 in 5. And also importantly to add that most of these PMADs remain undiagnosed, and sadly women have no access to screening, support, or treatments. Although this is slowly changing, but we have some way to go as far as access to screening, support, and treatment is concerned. But just keep in mind that general statistics, that's 1 in 5. That's an average of 1 in 5 women will suffer PMAD. I don't really know, just give me a minute. I don't really know how to get rid of this tab. I find it a bit distracting and I don't know how to get rid of it. Okay, I think I'm just going to carry on, but I'm finding it quite distracting when I feel like it's interfering with my slides and how they look. Anyway, I think we'll just go on. So this slide talks about some of the myths around pregnancy and motherhood. So these are things or stereotypes that we think, when we talk about pregnancy and motherhood, which are not necessarily true. So for instance, with pregnancy, what are some of the myths that come to mind? There are people who believe a pregnancy is easy, super easy. Like I had a very easy pregnancy, my labor went through very well. So you think that is the case for everyone. And still around the same, we also have people who, feel that one of the myths around pregnancy is that pregnancy is hard. Sometimes there's that there's that assumption that a happy baby is equals to a happy mom. Is it always true? No. The pregnancy is equals to a live birth or a full-term baby. November is actually Prematurity Awareness Month. So we're also highlighting that a pregnancy is not equals to a full-term baby. It's not always equals to a full-term baby or a live baby. And maybe this that, pregnancy will keep a relationship, or I'm going to get his baby, or I'm going to make her pregnant just so that you can keep this relationship going. That's a myth around pregnancy. This isn't always true. When you look at birth and delivery, there's the assumption that getting a C-section is, and I use quotes here for easier because that's not the truth, but there's the assumption that women who opt for CS, go the easy way. And in the same breath, that natural birth is for strong women. There's also the assumption that the moment your baby is born, you will feel an instantaneous love, or you'll be able to breastfeed immediately. That's not always true. Then motherhood is instinctual, that, to think that, it comes naturally. I should be able to know how to be a mom. But the truth is that when a baby is born, so is a mother, because this is not a place that you've been before. So you're definitely learning on the go. Then we have breastfeeding is natural. Is it really natural? I can still do it all. I'm a superwoman. That's a very huge misconception around motherhood. I will sleep when the baby sleeps. And of course, the all-time famous one of I will snap back. I think that is all for that slide. So then the question becomes, why do some women get PMADs and others do not? So when you're looking at the statistics I had mentioned earlier about 1 in 5 women getting a PMAD. So why won't the rest of the 4 women get a PMAD? Basically, we're asking what makes it, what puts some women at a higher risk of getting a condition and not others. So the first thing that we're going to look at is biological sensitivity. This is an evidence-based risk factor. And we're saying that some women are more sensitive to drastic hormonal changes during and after pregnancy. So we find that the women, when their hormonal levels fluctuate like that, it really destabilizes them mentally and places them at a higher risk of getting a PMAD compared to women whose bodies are not as sensitive. We'll also talk about genetic predisposition. This is basically where if in your family they say an auntie or your mom or your sister especially on the maternal side. If you have someone like that who's had a mental illness, then there's a chance, there's an increased risk for you. And I'm very aware of that, because if I've gotten PPD, then my sister is at a higher risk, and then that makes it something that we need to watch out for. Then psychosocioeconomic factors. So this is a very big word for basically psychological factors, which means if someone is in a high stress environment, then they're at a higher risk. Social factors, if what is the social environment that someone is that a pregnant woman or a new mother is in. Here we're looking at things like abuse. Is there abuse in their life? Is there trauma? Do they have support even as this baby is being born? Do they feel supported? Then economic factors, basically economic challenges, so financial constraints and all. Up until there, I don't know whether, Katile, is there like a scheduled Q&A break at the end, or do I have to go and pause midway just to find out if everyone is together with us?
Hello.
Yes.
We'll have a at the end of the session.
So I could just breeze through the slides?
Yeah, or you
Okay.
can ask questions in the middle.
Okay, I think maybe up until there, I don't know if anyone has something that they'd like to clarify or to just, confirm or to ask, to add to that. Okay, so I think I'm just going to carry on. So risk factors, that's what you mentioned. Then on to the next slide. So this slide basically just outlines. And again, we said PMAS is perinatal for P, mood for M, anxiety for A, and disorders. Basically conditions that interfere with your day-to-day living. So we have depression during pregnancy and postpartum. And again, we're going to look into this in detail in the coming slides. Bipolar disorder, anxiety, postpartum OCD, postpartum PTSD, and postpartum psychosis. So did you know that pregnant women can actually get depression? I didn't know this. I had pregnancy depression and I didn't know it, because again, the myth of pregnancy, you're supposed to enjoy it, you're supposed to be glowing, supposed to be a beautiful period. It just wasn't for me. And that is the same for 1 in 5 pregnant women. So that's the statistics. Those are the rates. 1 in 5 pregnant women will experience pregnancy depression. And again, like I mentioned, the well-being, a very beautiful moment in your life. But for 1 in 5 women, that's not the truth. So then we're also saying that pregnancy depression sometimes mimics the symptoms of a typical pregnancy, but there are quite a number of differences. And again, pregnancy comes with a lot of mood changes. So how do you know when this is pregnancy depression and when this is a typical pregnancy? That's what you're looking at in the next slide. So let's look at a typical pregnancy. And I mean, against the symptoms that that characterize pregnancy depression. So in a typical pregnancy, we're saying that the mood is often up and down. It changes, it fluctuates quite a bit. You can have a pregnant woman who's very jovial in the morning, and then evening comes around and she's just feeling meh, or she's crying. But with pregnancy depression, the mood changes, but this is someone who is often low, like they don't have a lot of high moments. They feel they feel down quite often. So that's one of the differences. If you find a pregnant woman who's mostly sad, mostly, feeling very low, very moody, then there's a chance that could be a symptom of pregnancy depression. With a typical pregnancy, their self-esteem remains unchanged, like how they were feeling about themselves remains unchanged. But with pregnancy depression, again, we have a very low self-esteem. In a typical pregnancy, given the chance, a pregnant woman can fall and stay asleep. But we are realizing with pregnancy depression, and with some of the women who get in touch with us at PPDKenya, even if they do have a chance to sleep, they have trouble falling and staying asleep. So either they try and fall asleep at, say, 9 p.m., but they can only get sleep at 2 a.m., or they do fall asleep at 9 p.m., but they will keep waking up through the night. And that's not a good sign. With a typical pregnancy, we're saying that rest refreshes and re-energizes them. So if they're tired, they've had a long day at work, once they get home and they put their feet up and they rest for some time, they feel better, they feel energized. But with pregnancy depression, that does not ease the fatigue. So if you're a pregnant woman who's constantly tired, and not just because they're edging towards the third trimester, they're just constantly tired. So even if they rest, even if they sleep, they don't feel like it makes them better, which again is a red flag. Another very key difference between a typical pregnancy and pregnancy depression is, in a typical pregnancy, they're able to feel pleasure, they're able to feel joy, they're able to enjoy the things that they used to enjoy. If they used to enjoy cooking, maybe just because of morning sickness, they may not be able to do that. But if they love traveling, for as long as their doctor gives them the green light, they're able to travel, they enjoy it, they find joy in it. But with pregnancy depression, and this is one of the key things that we've seen in our work with supporting women, they just don't have any joy. They don't enjoy the things they used to do. They used to enjoy cooking. They cannot remember the last time they cooked. They used to enjoy hanging out with their friends. They've pulled out of their social circles. When you call them, they don't pick. They just very dissociated from their social circles. Yet this is someone who used to enjoy hanging out before they got pregnant. That is a red flag. Then the last two is appetite increases as the pregnancy grows. So in a typical pregnancy, as they inch towards the second and the third trimester, ideally their appetite increases to support the growing baby. But with pregnancy depression, we're saying it's dysregulated. So then we have a mom who is either eating too much or they're eating way too little. And this brings to mind the example is a mom we once helped during one of our outreach programs, and she told us during pregnancy she'd really survive on tea and KDF. So you can imagine this is a mom who's growing a baby and they're surviving on tea and KDF. That's a huge red flag, because then that's a dysregulation of appetite. When someone is struggling with a mental health condition, one of the symptoms is that they either ate too little, which is now the case for our mom here who was surviving on KDF and tea, or they eat way too much. And then now this becomes a vicious cycle, because then when they eat too much, it comes with a lot of weight gain. A lot of weight gain comes with, again, it ties in with a low self-esteem. So it becomes a very vicious cycle. So that's also a red flag to watch out for. Then the most important, and probably as I wind up with this slide, is with a typical pregnancy, you will not hear a mom saying that they're suicidal, or they're thinking about suicide, or they're making a suicide plan. But with pregnancy depression, there's a lot of suicide ideation. So even if a mom doesn't have an active plan, there's the idea of suicide in their minds. That's a red flag. Or they're having suicidal thoughts, or they're actually drafting up a plan. Again, that is a very key red flag. So that's just like a summary or a condensed version of the differences between a typical pregnancy, so that a mom is not just having a labile mood and we think it's pregnancy depression. It could just be that she's just had a bad day. But for pregnancy depression, these are the key symptoms. So we talked about pregnancy depression. This next slide is postpartum depression, probably something that quite a number of us might have come across or might have heard about. Again, in low and middle income countries like Kenya and developing countries across the world, postpartum depression affects 1 in 5 new mothers. So for every 5 new mothers that there's a chance that one of them will experience postpartum depression. And again, when does it occur? Typically in the first year after childbirth. I remember we once shared this piece of information and someone reached out and told us that she's had postpartum depression for about 2 years. And we validate, like, the experience is valid, but what we're also slowly realizing in our work is that a lot of the times moms will reach out and say that, they actually had it in the first year of birth, the first year after birth, and it was never screened or diagnosed, and they didn't get help for it. So then it can easily morph into what we call chronic depression if this mom doesn't get help. Then the onset is often gradual, but it may be very rapid. So then what does that mean? We're saying that the symptoms of postpartum depression during this first year after they get their baby, they can start very, very gradually, very, very slowly. So that a mom who used to enjoy things, like they don't get all these symptoms almost seemingly instantaneously. It's just setting pole. But we're also seeing that it can be very rapid. It really just varies from one mom to another. Then we're saying that it is usually diagnosed with the symptoms present continuously for more than 2 weeks. So for many of these conditions that we're looking at, if someone does get medical attention, we say that the diagnosis is made by a mental health professional, but a basic guideline that they follow is that the symptoms that we're going to shared have been there for more than 2 weeks, continuously for more than 2 weeks. So if someone has been having it for 14, 15 days in a month continuously, if someone has not been eating well, it's for more than that period of 2 weeks. If they've been having suicide ideation, it's on for quite a number of days back to back. So that's just a basic guideline. But also important to say that this diagnosis is to be done by a qualified mental health professional. So now that we've talked about postpartum depression, we're going to bring in another condition that is commonly known as the baby blues. So this part that is covered here by this tab that I can't seem to move says that the baby blues are not a disorder. So then what are they? The baby blues are not a disorder because not only do they affect 8 in 10 new mothers, that's about 80%. So quite a number of moms will experience the baby blues. But we are saying that they are mild mood swings that usually occur in the first 2 weeks after birth. Now, the key thing with baby blues is that they usually go away on their own. They're very short-lived, and they're very short-lived, the baby blues usually go away on their own. They're short-lived, and they often don't need any treatment. So the reason why we're seeing 8 in 10 new mothers will experience baby blues is because, again, the hormonal fluctuations. You've just gotten this baby, the progesterone that was very high in your body has suddenly plummeted, and you're just adjusting to this new life with this baby who's 100% dependent on you. So you find that some moms may become moody, they may cry quite a bit. And it's interesting because the moms that we've been able to support and work with in this journey will say, sometimes I'll cry because I'm so happy and I'm so in love with this baby. And then sometimes I'll cry because I'm wondering, where is the old me that was there, the old me that could go to the supermarket and come back at whatever time. So it's pretty interesting to see that weepiness is not just because they're sad. It can also be because they're incredibly happy and in awe of this little baby. Then also sadness and forgetfulness. Those are the baby blues. 8 in 10 new moms, that's 80% of new moms, and they are very short-lived. They last about 2 weeks after birth, and those are the symptoms that we just shared. So it's important to add this, that the difference between the baby blues and postpartum depression can be summarized in 3 key points. The severity. Baby blues, as we have said, they're mild, then they go away on their own. So a mom will probably be weepy the first few weeks of this baby's life. And, once they get the hang of it and the baby starts to sleep well, they become okay. But with postpartum depression, the symptoms are very intense and they don't usually go away on their own. When you talk about timing, and on the timing of the onset of baby blues and postpartum depression, baby blues typically start anytime in the first 2 weeks, and postpartum depression begins anywhere in the first year after birth. So what does this point mean? It means baby blues, typically the first 2 weeks after birth, but postpartum depression, you can have a mom to a 9-month-old baby getting postpartum depression. You can have a mom to a 2-week-old baby getting postpartum depression. So the time frame for postpartum depression is longer than that of baby blues. And then treatment, as you mentioned in the previous slide, baby blues are short-lived. They don't require treatment. Postpartum depression definitely requires treatment. I mean, if you're looking at someone who's having suicide ideation, they're not feeding too well, that's not just something you can wish away. So those are the differences between baby blues and postpartum depression. And maybe just to sum it up for us to remember, baby blues are not a disorder. So now that we've talked about postpartum depression and pregnancy depression, we are aware that some moms will, a mom come and tell you, oh, my appetite is dysregulated, or I don't find joy in the things I used to enjoy, So what are some of the things they will say? And actually sum up this list from, from our work, from what moms would tell us, from what moms will inbox us and say. We've had a mom tell us, I miss the old me. I just miss the girl that I was. I miss that I could wake up and do whatever it is I wanted to do, or I could wake up and go to the store and come back and, without having to pre-plan for that. We've had a mom tell us, I just want to go very, very far away and never come back. Another mom might tell you, oh, I feel very, very alone. No one understands this. No one understands what I'm going through. No one understands the space I'm in. I feel overwhelmed by everything. Hi, new mom, how are you coping? And they'll just tell you, I feel very overwhelmed. I feel exhausted by everything around me. One of the common ones, and I remember this is something that really used to play out in my mind at the time that I had postpartum depression, was I don't think I was meant to be a mom, or motherhood wasn't meant for me. And lastly, this doesn't feel like me. This is not a conclusive list of what moms might say to you, but it's not typical of a mom who's coping well in her motherhood journey. So sometimes mom will say, they may not have the words to say, I'm depressed, or my appetite is dysregulated. These are some of the things they might say, or you might hear them, or you might see them post even on Facebook. So now that we've talked about postpartum depression, and then please note, this is not a scientific presentation, so I've really tried to simplify it for us to understand better. So if anything is unclear, please note it down, and then you can talk about it during the Q&A. So you have bipolar disorder with peripartum onset. And just to again define, what does peripartum mean? Peri is from the word perinatal. So during pregnancy, or after, and then partum again is birth. So during pregnancy or after birth. That's the bipolar disorder now for pregnant or new mothers. It is also called the PPD imposter. And I'm going to explain why. So even before I do that, many of us, have probably said, oh, this weather is bipolar, or the traffic is bipolar, to mean that it shifts quite a bit from two extremes. And that is wrong. Maybe just to highlight that we shouldn't equate inanimate things to a mental health condition, because then when you say the weather is bipolar, what does that mean for the person living with bipolar? It only serves to add to the stigma, which is something that we are consciously trying to fight and to raise awareness. So just a heads up for all of us. But basically, bipolar disorder means two ends of the, two polar ends. So what we are saying, that this is a mood disorder that is characterized by mood swings, usually from very high. So that's what I mean when I say polarity, so two ends, two polar ends. So very, very high, or high, which is hypomania, or very, very low, depression. So the reason why we're calling this the PPD imposter is because when someone is in the high, what you're calling mania, that means they're in a very good mood, they're very bubbly, very cheery, very chappy, they're very excited about life. It is hard to think that someone could actually be having a mental health condition when they're in this phase. So the reason you're calling it a PPD imposter is because often people will not seek help during mania. And for good reason. I mean, if I'm okay, I'm able to function, I'm very productive at work, I wouldn't think that I have a mental health condition. So then what happens is affected people seek help when they're in the depressive phase. So if a proper diagnosis is not done, if a proper psychosocial history is not done, so the mental health professional should be able to ask you, how have you been feeling? Do you experience this, very highs and very lows? If they don't do that, then it's going to be diagnosed as postpartum depression, which it is not. So that's why we're calling it the PPD imposter. Why? Simply put, because people typically seek help when they're in the depressive phase. So what are the symptoms of bipolar disorder? Again, we talked about mania, the highs, and now depression, which are the lows. So with mania, they become very euphoric. They're in cloud nine, life is good, they're coping, they're feeling very productive. They have a reduced need for sleep. They are so energetic, like they are able to get projects done, they're able to get work done. They're usually very productive during the mania phase, but then you might also notice that they have a rapid speech. It's like they're talking over their own words. They're rambling, sort of. They might have racing thoughts. So in as much as they're super productive, they might have racing thoughts. They are unable to focus. Again, increased productivity. And maybe to contextualize this with new moms who have bipolar, the cases that I've read about and come across, this increased productivity usually looks like, this is a new mom. She's supposed to be sleeping, but for some reason, because of bipolar, she's not able to. So she'll clean the entire house. She'll cook meals for a whole week. Like that's what increased productivity looks like in the context of a mom, a pregnant woman, or a mom postpartum. So they'll cook, they'll clean up, they'll go shopping for their baby. And this is usually easily noticed by others because we're thinking, hey, you have so much energy. Yeah? Then impulsiveness. So a lot of impulsiveness, stroke recklessness when it comes to things like spending money or, or sexual behavior. Then the grand ideas. So then they might sit and come up with a project and they're thinking they're going to save, they're going to save some very great cause in this world. So grand ideas. And then in severe cases, because the body can only handle that kind of mania for so long, in severe cases, there's usually a lot of delusion and hallucination. That's the last bit of the slide. So those are the highs. And if you're not keen, you might not notice that their speech is rambling or that they have super increased energy levels or they're very agitated. So it's hard for them to seek help during the mania phase, the highs. So depression, the lows, again, the symptoms that we've talked about in the previous slide, they're severely depressed, they're super irritable, they, have lots of anxiety. And typically this is when they seek help, So then just a note here that the criteria for bipolar diagnosis is that symptoms last more than 4 days and interfere with daily living and relationships. So we're saying that these symptoms, you can imagine if a mom is super productive for 4 days back to back, they've been cleaning up, they've, wamebakisha tu waoshe ceiling sasa, but they've been cleaning up, they've been taking care of the baby, they've been having their friends over, they're super productive. You can only maintain that kind of energy level for only so long. So if this happens for more than 4 days, of course, now it starts to interfere with their day-to-day lives and their relationships, their partners, their families. If they have other kids, older kids, that gets in the way. Then in severe cases, again, we've said delusions and hallucinations. So delusions, and hallucinations, they start seeing things and hearing things that are not existent. And that makes bipolar disorder, in severe cases, puts moms at a high risk just because of all these symptoms. And of course, now once they start hearing and seeing things that don't exist, then they might be what's the word? They might be caused to their delusions, and that conditions that affect how moms feel or their emotions. So we've looked at pregnancy depression, postpartum depression, stroke baby blues, and bipolar. So then we're going to look at for anxiety for the conditions under this spectrum. So postpartum anxiety is what I've abbreviated as PPA. This affects 1 in 7 this is 7. I think the font makes it look like 1 in 1, which of course doesn't make sense, but this is 1 in 7 new mothers will experience postpartum anxiety. So what is it? Postpartum anxiety is like an umbrella term or a general term for conditions that are characterized by anxiety. And we're going to look into that in a minute. But this includes generalized anxiety disorder, panic disorder, OCD, and PTSD. Don't worry if this information feels a bit too overwhelming, but I think for us just to be able to have an understanding of how a mother's mind can change during pregnancy and what places them at risk and what some of these symptoms may look like. So generally, when we're talking about anxiety, we're talking about this spectrum is characterized by a lot of uneasiness. So agitation, irritability, a heightened awareness. Heightened awareness means a mom is super vigilant. Is my baby breathing? Is that just moving up and down? So that's heightened awareness. They step into a car or a matatu and they're thinking, okay, are the seats disinfected? Is there a chance that I may get a virus here? So that heightened awareness, they're very, very vigilant. So much so that it again interferes with their day-to-day lives. Inability to sit still. So you find a mom who is unable to just sit still. They constantly have to be doing something. Persistent worry about the baby or the mother's own health. Again, will my baby catch a virus? If I go to work and I come back coughing, will my baby catch it? Will it be my fault? So that constant worry. And maybe just to also highlight, many moms will worry about their baby's health, but it shouldn't be to the point where it interferes with you functioning during the day. But with moms who have postpartum anxiety and these other conditions, this worry means they're not even able to function during the day. So they might not be able to get back to work, which again is a problem because then it affects their economic status and that becomes a vicious cycle on its own. Then we're also talking about increased physical symptoms. So a racing heart, palpitations, dizziness, hot flashes, and nausea. Some moms will say when they're feeling anxious, it comes with a racing heart. They feel like they're having a heart attack or dizziness. So suddenly, like the world starts spinning around them, hot flashes or nausea. So that's just like a general overview of postpartum anxiety. So then now we'll look at the different conditions. In here, we've talked about panic disorder. So panic disorder is characterized by episodes of very intense fear or discomfort reaching very high levels in a very short time. So this is under anxiety, postpartum anxiety. And research shows that there are 3 persistent fears. And I agree with this from the work that we're doing, that moms will usually have. So the fear of going crazy, we've had a mom in boxers and say, I just fear I'm going to go nuts. And I feel like I'm literally going to go crazy. So that fear is very real for them. The fear of dying. I've had a mom who got in touch with us on email and she said that this is a constant fear for her. She's lost family members and this is something that, she's really just very afraid of. And it's very real for her. The fear of losing control. So with a panic disorder, most of the time, these attacks usually come in waves. So in waves, a mom can be okay 1 minute, and then the next minute, they just have an intense fear of feeling like they're going to lose their mind, feeling like they're going crazy. And maybe what's the most confusing thing about it is they don't have identifiable triggers. So then you ask a mom, so what's gotten you into this panic state? And they'll tell you, I don't know. I just felt it come all over me. I have no words to say. I can't identify any triggers. It just feels like I'm going to go crazy. So some moms will say it feels like a heart attack. They feel like they're choking or they're suffocating. So that's panic disorder. It reaches very high levels, like it peaks very, very quickly. And it's often, it usually doesn't make sense to the person looking, to the outside onlooker. What do you mean you fear that you're going to go crazy? But you see, for the mom, it's a very real, and it's a thing that exists for them. So that's panic disorder. Postpartum OCD. we hear quite a lot of people say, no, I think I'm OCD, but OCD is an actual diagnosable mental health condition. And when it comes to moms, we see that 1 in 10 new mothers, so that's 10% of new mothers will experience postpartum OCD. And this has often been found to be present with postpartum depression. So what is OCD? A lot of us, if you're a clean freak, you'll hear someone say, oh, I think I'm OCD. Or if someone likes things a certain way, oh, I think I'm OCD. Granted, is someone talking? Is someone talking?
Hello?
Okay, Katila, please help me out because
Hello, I have muted them.
Oh, okay. I thought they were asking a question or something. Okay. So I was saying postpartum OCD, we hear a lot about, if someone is a clean freak or they like things done a certain way, oh, hi, I think I'm OCD. But really, this is a mental health condition. And when we say OCD, so OCD stands for obsessive compulsive disorder. Again, disorder, this is a condition that interferes with your day-to-day living. So obsessions and compulsions, what are these? When you say obsessive compulsive disorder, what exactly do we mean? So obsessions are scary thoughts or mental pictures. I'll read through this and then explain. And then compulsions are the habits that are done to reduce the anxiety coming from these thoughts. So obsessions and compulsions. So maybe for us to be able to understand better, it's just to give an example. So a mom will have a very scary thought about drowning their baby, for instance. Not that they want to drown their baby. These are just very scary thoughts that they're having. So that's the obsession part of it, the obsessive part of it. So compulsions is a habit that they do to reduce these obsessive thoughts. So the obsessive thought here is, oh my God, I think I might drown my baby. So then what is the compulsion? So what will they do to prevent them from drowning their baby? They might not be able to birth their baby, or they may not be able to birth their baby unless someone is in the house with them. We've had moms who fear that their babies are going to fall from 4th floor, for instance, if that's where they live. So that's the obsession. It's a very scary and very intrusive thought. And often moms might not be able to tell you this, but because of the space that we're in, these are things that we hear, So then if a mom is afraid that her baby is gonna fall off 4th floor, then what do? They barricade the front door, or they never leave home via the front door with their baby alone. So those are the compulsions. So to put it in perspective, some compulsions include the avoidance of roads, the avoidance of roads or heights or sharp objects. So if a mom fears that she might stab her baby, and that's a very scary thought to have, and she might not be able to say this publicly, what will she do? She will avoid the kitchen because that's where the knives are. If a mom is afraid that her baby might, get some disease or some sickness, they'll be constantly counting their diapers. Did they have a bowel movement today? Are they peeing? What's the color of their pee? Then also cleaning obsessively and hypervigilance. A lot of hypervigilance, again, very heightened awareness. So they're going to install a nanny cam, they're going to have it on their phone. And it's not bad to have a nanny cam on your phone, but if you're checking the nanny cam 10 hours out of the 15 hours that you're awake, then that's cause for concern. That's definitely a red flag. So that's what we're talking, the obsessions. So those are the scary, intrusive thoughts or pictures that they have. Then the compulsions, what they're gonna do to prevent themselves from feeling that, from having that scary thought or that scary picture in their head. So let us highlight common OCD fears. So what are some of the, from research, what are some of the things that moms who have OCD will say? There's the fear of deliberate harm to the baby. So they fear they might drop them, they might drown them, they might stab them. And these are very hard things to say in a society where there's still a lot of stigma with mental health, but it's existent. We've said 1 in 10 moms have OCD, stroke PPD. So these are very real things. There's a fear of contamination or germs, so I cannot stay in the house if I haven't sanitized every surface. If I haven't, I have to sanitize my hands 5 times before I touch the baby. I will not have guests over because they're going to contaminate my house. These are very real fears. The fear of accidental harm. And the most common, again, perhaps, is ordering and arranging. So I like during bath time, I want my baby's clothes to be laid out a certain way. The diaper comes first before everything else, or I have to put on their hat first. So that's ordering and arranging. Then the checking of doors, of lights, of latches, door latches, breathing, stroke nanny cam. Just that, again, that hypervigilance and that awareness. So those are some of the common OCD fears. So remember, OCD is obsessive and obsessive compulsive disorder. So obsessions are the scary thoughts they have, and then the compulsions are what they do to prevent themselves from having these thoughts. So that's postpartum OCD. Then we're winding up. We have a couple more slides to go. So this is postpartum PTSD. PTSD might be a familiar term for some of us. PTSD is, I didn't write it in full here, but this is a post-traumatic stress disorder. So just know when it comes to PTSD, there's trauma there. So with moms, we're finding that this trauma can be real or perceived. So most moms who get postpartum PTSD experience some form of trauma during or after their delivery. And it's important to say that this trauma may be real, like it actually happened. A mom had an emergency CS, for instance, and they hadn't planned for that, or it can be perceived. So if a mom, for instance, goes to deliver and the hospital at the time has nurses on strike, then that is perceived trauma because who will be there to attend to me? I might lose my baby. I may not be able to get medical checkup in good time. So real or perceived trauma during or after delivery, where there's a possibility of injury or death to the baby or to the mom. Many of us will remember the lady sometime back. It was on all news outlets, but there's the case of the lady who unfortunately had to deliver on the floor in a hospital, and it was aired quite a bit. But I really hope that mom got help wherever she was, because that is a very traumatic experience. You are giving birth in front of all these people on the floor. No one plans to give birth on the floor. So then there's trauma, there's the possibility of injury or death to the baby or to the mom if they do have complications. So, just to contextualize what trauma looks like, we have traumatic events here. By all means, this is not an exhaustive list. So this is just highlighting or bringing to help us and better understand what postpartum PTSD looks like. So for moms, traumatic events can look like pregnancy or baby loss. That is a very, very traumatic event. And in honor of last month was Pregnancy and Infant Loss Awareness Month. And what we've been sharing on our page is for moms who've experienced loss, whether they miscarried or they had a stillbirth or baby died shortly after birth, there's a risk of postpartum PTSD because that loss, pregnancy loss, is super traumatic. Traumatic vaginal birth, stroke emergency C-section. So a traumatic vaginal birth, a mom had a 4th-degree tear and she had to be stitched up, or a mom, got an emergency CS. She was at work, she was working, and then she had complications, or her body, her waters broke and she had to get a CS, which she hadn't planned for. That can be traumatic. Baby going to NICU. So your baby's born and they have a health condition or they have some complications and they have to go to NICU. And for mothers who've been in NICU, it can be a very harrowing experience. Your tiny babies there are all these tubes coming in and going out of their nose, of their mouth. They have all these machines, all these monitors beeping around them. That can be traumatic. Prolonged labor. So you're looking at a mom who's been in labor for 36 hours. They haven't slept well. It's painful. That can be traumatic. Severe complications, a fetal anomaly. So your baby is diagnosed with a fetal anomaly, they have a hole in the heart, for instance, they have Down syndrome. That is a traumatic event because no one gets a baby thinking or preparing themselves that they're going to have a fetal anomaly. Or getting a special needs baby as well, that can be traumatic. And feeling unsupported or experiencing abuse by health professionals. So you go to hospital, and quite a number of moms might be able to talk to this, to share to this experience. You go to hospital and the nurses, they are not really kind, or they're not patient with you. You're a first-time mom, and they say all these things to you. And that, makes a mom feel as though their life is actually at risk because they're not able to ask questions or to say what they're really feeling. So feeling unsupported through abuse by health professionals can actually, count towards a traumatic event. What are some of the symptoms? Again, remember I said PTSD is post-traumatic stress disorder, and PP here stands for postpartum. So postpartum PTSD symptoms include re-experiencing the trauma. So in this case, the birth itself. They'll have flashbacks or nightmares about the event. So if a mom, for instance, had to go through an emergency, yes, she might be dreaming about or having nightmares about a birth gone wrong or a surgery gone wrong, or just been in a hospital setup. So those flashbacks or nightmares. Then avoidance of things associated with a traumatic event. So for instance, if they went to a hospital and they were abused or verbally abused, or they were not treated in a very nice way by the health professionals there, then going forward, they might actually avoid medical checkup just to avoid that whole scenario playing out again. Persistent arousal, irritability, or hypervigilance. So hypervigilance, again, that's heightened awareness. They just fear that this might happen again, or that my baby might be in danger, or I might need to see my baby in NICU, or have all those tubes in their bodies. So that hypervigilance, that irritability, that arousal. Panic attacks. Remember we talked about panic attacks in previous slides, and we were saying this is like the fear of dying, the fear of losing control, the fear of going nuts, and then detachment from reality. So those are some of the symptoms of postpartum PTSD. Then potential consequences of PTSD. I need to add here that this would be untreated PTSD. So if a mom has postpartum PTSD and it goes untreated, they might start to avoid postpartum care or OBGYN visits. So they might decide, you know what, I'm just not going to go see my doctor anymore. Or they might decide to have elective CSs in future pregnancy. They might decide to not to go for a vaginal birth. They might opt to go for an elective CS. So they decide, I'll just schedule my operation and get my baby that way. Then affected maternal child bond. If PTSD, and really if any mental health condition is not treated in good time, there's a chance that it might affect the bond that a mom and a child have. Sexual dysfunction or impaired intimacy. So this brings to mind the traumatic event. If a mom had a very traumatic vaginal birth, they had to be stitched up, for instance, or they get a fistula as a result, this might, interfere with their sexual life or a mom's sexual life with her partner. Difficulties in breastfeeding, especially in cases of rape and abuse. The rape and abuse are very traumatic events for any woman. So if a mom has gone through that kind of trauma and they get a baby, if their abuser, for instance, had their way with their breasts, then this mom might find it very hard to breastfeed, because when they think about their breast, it is the abuse or the rape or the sexual incident that comes to mind. Then the yearly anniversary of the traumatic birth. So some moms will always remember the day that their baby went to NICU. Some moms will always remember the due date that their baby was to be born, but then they miscarried or they had a pregnancy loss. So these are just some of the consequences of PTSD. Then this is the last condition, and I wrote it in red because it's very rare, first of all, and there's a very high risk of suicide and infanticide. So postpartum psychosis, we often minimize some of these mental health conditions when we tell someone, oh, I think you're psycho, but postpartum psychosis is a rare illness. So rare, in fact, that it affects 1 in 1,000 mothers. So that's 0.1% of new mothers who will get postpartum psychosis. And it often occurs very suddenly, usually in the first 2 weeks after birth. We're going to look into the next slide, the symptoms of postpartum psychosis. But the reason why it's rare, but it's also it is potentially fatal, is because there's a 5% risk of suicide, and I'll explain why, and a 5% risk of infanticide. Postpartum I meant for this to be psychosis. Postpartum psychosis is characterized by a loss of touch with reality, and this is what makes it an emergency. So we are saying this is a rare illness, but for 1 in 1,000 mothers, this is a reality. It occurs very suddenly, usually within the first 2 weeks after birth, and there's a chance of suicide and infanticide. Why? Because these moms lose touch with reality. So just to explain this more and for us to understand why this is an emergency, postpartum psychosis, moms who have postpartum psychosis will be very delusional, and they'll have very, very strange beliefs. They'll experience hallucinations. So we've said hallucinations refer to a state of mind where someone is seeing or hearing things that aren't really there. There's one famous case, maybe I can link it a bit later, but it's in the States. It's called the Yates, Yates, the Yates case. So Yates is a mom who had postpartum psychosis, and she killed her 5 children. And when she was questioned, she said that she had the voice telling her that her children were all going to die in hell. And so by drowning the kids, she was actually helping to save them from dying, from suffering in hell. So rationally, that doesn't make sense. But for this mom, it was very real. She was experiencing it. She said she had these voices in her head telling her to do X, Y, Z, and to save her kids. So then, save them by killing them. But for the person looking out from the person looking inside from the out, it doesn't make sense to them. But for this mom, it's very real. So hallucinations, hearing, seeing things that aren't there, they'll be telling you there are demons on the TV, or, I can see floating coffins. And for them, it's very, very real. For some moms, postpartum psychosis is accompanied by a lot of violence, so a lot of rage. They might be confused or disoriented. So you try to talk to this mom, and what they're saying doesn't make sense. So that confusion, being disoriented, they're very paranoid and suspicious of the people around them. And they have very rapid mood swings. Postpartum psychosis. So then, now that you mentioned that, I thought to highlight this slide. It's important to know these things about postpartum psychosis. For some moms, the symptoms can come and go. So you find a mom is okay 1 minute, they're functioning well, they're not rambling, and then the next minute they're seeing messages from the TV, or God is telling them something on the TV, or the devil is telling them something on the TV. And many of the women who experience postpartum psychosis do not harm themselves or their babies. What are we saying? We're saying that out of this 1 in 1,000 women who experience postpartum psychosis, many of them will not harm their babies. But why is it an emergency? Why should we be keen to ensure that moms who, are experiencing hallucinations, are delusional, why should we be keen to make sure they get medical help? Is because, again, there's always a risk of danger due to detachment from reality. When a mom is experiencing hallucinations and delusions, the fact that they can hear voices and see things that are not existent, that places them at risk of danger. Because if they act on those thoughts or voices, then you're looking at a risk of suicide and infanticide. And in Kenya, there are cases that I like think might have been postpartum psychosis. Unfortunately, again, we don't have statistics. There isn't sort of a referral system to be able to follow through. But there's some time back, there was a case of a mom who threw her kids and I think her neighbor's kids. I don't know if she threw them or she killed them, but there was a famous case on the outskirts of Nairobi where a mom killed her children and her neighbor's kids. And this is not typical. It's just not normal. So I have a hunch she might have been suffering from postpartum psychosis, which again just highlights the need for these moms to get help as soon as possible. So that's why we're saying affected moms need to be assessed, treated, and monitored by a mental health professional, which I think I'd really like to applaud Katile and her team for putting together this training, because we are the people around these moms, we are the society around these moms. If we can be aware of the red flags to look out for, if we can be aware of the symptoms to look out for, then we actually might be able to help them get the help that they need and to support them. So now that we've talked about postpartum depression, anxiety, OCD, PTSD, what are the risk factors? I know I mentioned this a bit briefly. What are the risk factors for PMADs? Again, risk factors do not mean that a mom will automatically get a mental health condition, but we should be very cognizant that if these risk factors exist for a mom, then there's a high chance that she might get a PMAD during pregnancy or after. So then if we are aware of this, if a mom, for instance, has had before, so if I do decide to get another baby, then I should be aware that this is a risk factor. I might get a PMAD a second time. So previous PMADs in the past, a brother who had schizophrenia, or you've unfortunately lost a loved one to suicide, or I don't know, your dad probably had depression, then that also significantly increases your risk for a PMAD if you're a woman during pregnancy or after. We're also talking about significant mood reactions to hormonal changes. So you'll find that when girls get to puberty and experience PMS, so that's premenstrual syndrome, and they have adverse reactions to family planning methods. So if you're a woman and you get a family planning method and your body rejects it, these significant hormonal changes, they place you at risk of a PMAD. Why? Because during pregnancy, for sure, your hormones are going to fluctuate quite a bit. Hormonal conditions, so we're talking about gestational diabetes, and thyroid conditions as well, that increases the risk of getting a PMAD. Socioeconomic factors, and you get quite a bit of this with postpartum depression in Kenya. So moms who have a very poor social support, not because they want to, but either their families are not around, or they don't have family around them, or they don't have family. Like, this is probably an orphan who doesn't have a close relationship with her extended family. Intimate partner violence, or GBV. So if a new mom is suffering violence from her partner, that increases their risk of a PMAD. If they're having financial constraints, and this is something that we've seen during the COVID period since last year, many people lost their jobs. So that really makes parenting a bit hard and places a new mother at risk, because you can imagine you just lost your job, you have a baby coming, they're going to need formula or diapers, they're going to need to go for clinic for the injections. So where is the money going to come from? That stressful phase can really impact a woman's mental health during pregnancy and after, and drastic life changes. And then also high stress parenting. So high stress parenting, we'd be looking at single moms who are parenting alone for whatever reason, teen mothers, and parents of multiples. So if you can imagine, getting one child means, you have to arrange your finances to cater for their diapers, their formula, their hospital, their clinic. So how much more for parents of triplets or parents who have quadruplets? That is high stress parenting. It really needs a lot of resources and a lot of support. So these are risk factors which have been shown. These are evidence-based risk factors. Evidence-based risk factors for PMAS. They've actually been researched and have been seen too. increase the risk for a PMAD. So existing exacerbating factors. So this means that the research might not have shown a direct link between these factors and a PMAD, but they are known to changia. They are known to add on to, onto the challenges of raising a child, and also just the risk of getting a mental health condition. So looking at sleep deprivation, of course, getting a new baby means you're not going to be sleeping well for quite some time. Difficulty breastfeeding. We like to think that breastfeeding comes naturally and mom should be able to wing it, but the truth is it's not as simple as it sounds. It's a lot of adjustments, a lot of learning on the go. There's a history of sexual abuse or GBV. We mentioned this in postpartum PTSD. Pregnancy and infant loss, we also mentioned that. Childcare stress or relationship issues. So you have a new mom whose relationship is just not working out with her partner, or the partner decided to not be present. That can also just contribute to the risk of getting a PMAD. Special needs or high needs child, we've talked about that. Complications during or after pregnancy is also another factor. So once we've looked at the different conditions that exist, we've looked at the risk factors, and just to reiterate that these risk factors, just because you've had a PMAD with a previous pregnancy, or because you have mood reactions to your family planning method, or any of these factors, does not mean that automatically you'll get a PMAD. But it's important for us to know this. Why? Because then we're able to preempt or to act on it before, and do not automatically mean that you're going to get a PMAD. So now that we've talked about all that, so what treatment options are available? I've listed them, grouped them into 3: social support, psychotherapy, and medication. So social support, the reason why social support is recommended and is a proven way to help moms who have a PMAD is because it provides a safe space for moms for non-judgmental listening. And again, to put it in perspective, if at the time that my child was younger and I had all these very intrusive thoughts, I remember for a long period of time, I didn't used to go into the kitchen alone, because in my head, all I could see was, I'm just going to take the knife and stab this child. So I didn't used to go to the kitchen. If at that time I went online and I typed, I cannot go to the kitchen because I fear I might kill my child, then I can bet that quite a number of trolls and quite a number of negative comments would be there. And that's part of the reason why moms may not feel okay or may not feel safe to share what they're really going through, because these are not safe spaces. So with social support, you're giving moms a space to say, this is not what I expected. This is not easy. I miss the old person that I was. I miss my old life, or it's just hard. So if we provide moms with safe spaces, and this is what Postpartum Depression Kenya does through peer support, if you're providing these safe spaces, moms can actually say, look, this is what I'm going through. This is what I'm feeling. This is what I'm experiencing. Can I get help? Does anyone understand? So social support groups are very, very important. We have peer support. So peer support is one of the ways we do it at Postpartum Depression Kenya. So as someone who has gone through postpartum depression and have recovered, I am a peer supporter, which means I'm not a psychiatrist, I'm not a psychologist, but I certainly can walk the journey with moms who are there right now. Why? Because I have been there. I know what it feels like. I understand. So that peer support. Telesupport, with COVID, we've almost all gone virtual. We're having a virtual meeting right now. This might not have been possible if it wasn't virtual, to just get all these people at this time and have this presentation. Then faith communities, so churches, mosques, temples, are there spaces where moms can come together and share what they're going through if they're suffering from a mental health condition. Then psychotherapy. is talk therapy that is offered by a qualified mental health professional. And this, what makes psychotherapy so powerful is because in addition to just like taking the form of treatment as it is, there's a lot of psychoeducation. So what does that mean? A qualified professional is able to offer information or explain issues related to your perinatal mental health. At the time that I had postpartum depression, I did get help. I saw a therapist for quite a number of sessions. And when I talk about this psychoeducation, what comes to mind is how she really emphasized that there were issues that I was struggling with before I got the baby, and they were just heightened now that the baby was here. So psychoeducation is that offering information or explaining certain issues that are coming into play now that you're a mom. So that's what makes it so powerful. Then medication. There's been a lot of stigma around medication and mothers because there's a fear that, can I breastfeed and give my baby, can I breastfeed, give my baby my milk and still take antidepressants, for instance? But research has shown that there are safe drugs, there's safe medication for mental health conditions. And the goal here, why we're giving medication, is for a mom who's suffering from a severe PMAD to ease this suffering, just so she can get better, she can feel better, she can be able to cope from day to day. Then medication should be prescribed by a psychiatrist. So this is not to be done by a psychologist. Ideally, this is not to be done by a peer supporter. So as Samoina, I cannot listen to a mom and tell them, I think you need drug A or drug B, because I'm not a psychiatrist, and medication should be prescribed by a psychiatrist. So those are the 3 treatment options. And some moms will need social support, especially for mild cases. Some moms will need social support. So we'll have conversations with them on the PPDKenya inbox. And after a week or 2, they're like, I think I can cope. Some moms will need that social support and they need to see a therapist, which is something that we always recommend at PPDKenya. Some moms will need all 3. They'll need social support, they'll need to see a therapist, and they'll need to take medication. And there's nothing wrong with that. We never hear someone who's had diabetes and we tell them, don't go see a doctor. But for mental health, there's still a lot of stigma. Of course, now with sessions like this, there's a lot of awareness and we're slowly making some progress, but we still have some way to go. So just know that some moms might need all 3, some moms will need just 2, some moms will just need social support and they'll be fine. But all these treatment options are valid. So I included this slide among the last ones just to highlight about medication, the place for antidepressants and medication for bipolar and psychosis. There's been a lot of misinformation on the use of medication for PMAD, and for good reason, because there's been a lot of thoughts, and again, just misinformation really, that if you take antidepressants when you're pregnant, you might lose the baby. Take antidepressants when you're pregnant, your baby might be born with certain birth defects. They might have issues with their heart, they might get autism. But there's research to back this up, to say that really researchers have done this, and there's resources. Maybe I can share with Katile later for anyone who's interested in reading more about that. But research shows that there's no increased risk of a miscarriage or a birth defect or autism if you're taking medication for a PMAD during pregnancy. Most importantly, we need to remember, what are we looking at? Would we rather have a mom who's having bipolar that is untreated, which means they're delusional, or would we rather, look at the risk of treatment? So if we give them antidepressants, there's no increased risk of miscarriage. So what we're really looking at the risk-benefit analysis. Are we better off with a mom who's not functioning because she has bipolar or psychosis? Or are we better off with a mom who we can give medication and it has no effect on her breastfeeding child? It does not increase her risk of pregnancy. What does that risk-benefit analysis look like? Remember also that there are 2 patients. So when you're treating a mom who has postpartum depression, by extension, you're taking care of her child. So treatment benefits both the mother and the child. So this mother will be at a better place to care for her child. But illness, so if this postpartum depression goes untreated, if postpartum psychosis goes untreated, this is a risk to both of them. So then if a mom doesn't get their psychosis diagnosed on time, and unfortunately we lose her to suicide and we lose her child and she kills her child, then we've lost both patients. So risk-benefit analysis again. And again, remember, medication must always be prescribed by a psychiatrist. So I'm winding up, and we mentioned untreated PMAD. So what happens if this mom is pregnant or is a new mom and she doesn't get help for, say, postpartum depression or anxiety? So during pregnancy, we are seeing that there's increased risk of mental illness after birth. So how I like to explain this is when you're pregnant, it's quite a challenge to just, if a mom has pregnancy depression, it's a huge challenge to take care of herself, in addition to the fatigue and all the changes that come with pregnancy. Then how much more when the baby actually comes? When the baby comes, we're looking at lack of sleep, we're looking at adjusting to this new role, we're looking at healing from birth, whether that was a C-section or a vaginal birth, we're looking at healing. So all these factors, they certainly make it a lot harder for a mom who did not get help during pregnancy. An untreated PMAD. So if you're looking at untreated postpartum depression, there's a chance there'll be poor maternal and child outcomes. So for moms whose children, for kids whose moms have a mental health condition, this mom will definitely not be able to care for herself. She might not be able to take her child for the immunization schedule. There's also increased risk of drug and substance abuse. If she's not able to cope with all these changes and she's struggling with her mental health, there's a chance that she might actually turn to drugs and substances. Again, both patients, a mom who's using drugs or a mom who's struggling with alcohol addiction as a result of her poor mental health, that affects the child. Then likely the most devastating effect of them all is suicide or infanticide. Ultimately, I think this is the most devastating of them all, for them, for the people who are affected, for their families, for the community. Just the loss of life, for a mom to get to that point where she feels like she's better off dead, there's a lot of pain there. And that's definitely something that we are working towards preventing or towards creating awareness about. That brings me to the end of this slide. I tried to cover, most of it in a very simplified manner. So thank you for listening, everyone. I don't know if there are questions, but we can always connect. I think Atile shared on the chat or on the Facebook page about where you can find us, but it's at PPDKenya everywhere. But I think that sums it up. I'm open to questions. I don't know if I can stop presenting my screen, but I think I can now, if there are any questions, comments, clarifications, I think I'd open the floor to that now.
Thank you so much, speaker, for that wonderful session. I've really learned a lot of the different PMADs that you have, and I really appreciate the wonderful presentation. From me, I've learned a lot about postpartum depression, and I hope everyone also from the team who are participants, they have also learned a lot. So thank you so much, our speaker. And from the participants, I don't know if someone has a question, you can unmute, or you can chat in the chat box so that I can read out to the speaker. I can see a comment from Eunice Onuoga. Thank you so much. This was a great session and well done. Thank you to the speaker, and you being up here makes it so real. Do you have a question from the participants?
A question or anything I need to clarify, maybe?
Jack Mai saying thank you so much.
Oh, you're welcome.
maybe from the participants, we can use a thumbs up to show appreciation to the speaker if we don't have a question.
Actually, I can actually see a question on the chat, I think from Anulika.
Yes.
For a woman that was affected mentally after, I assume that is after giving birth, it's trauma caused by postpartum depression. I'm not, I understand. Maybe Anulika, you can unmute and ask this, just clarify. I'm not sure I'm able to follow that. Then the second question says, is there a drug that if not taken during pregnancy can trigger mental health? I think she meant a mental health condition on a child. Is there a drug that if not taken during pregnancy? Oh, okay, I think that,
Hello?
Anulika, are you on? Okay, just,
Yes,
yeah, please share.
I'm on. The first
Okay.
question, like I have a woman that is living close to me.
Mm-hmm.
Can you hear me?
Yes, I
Can
can,
you hear me?
Anulika.
Good evening. No? Okay. I have a woman that was living close to me. So after she gave birth, she started having mental problem. She talks to herself. She likes to stay alone, but she doesn't wound her children. No. So by the time I asked the husband says after she gave birth that the mental problem started. So I don't know. Is it depression that caused it, or I don't really know what might have caused it? That's the first question. Then the second question, for the children, for a child, like some mothers that maybe during pregnancy, they used to ask them to take their normal routine drug. For instance, for a woman that did not take that routine drug at all, you know, some don't like to take drug during pregnancy, some like to skip it. Does it affect the mental health of a child? Like some children that used to have, that used to be abnormal. Is it because of non-taking of their normal routine drug during pregnancy that the children are being affected? Like some children, their eye will be looking somehow, some will be looking like imbecile and all that. So that's the two questions I have. Thank you.
Okay. Thanks, Anulika. I think now it's a bit clearer. For the neighbor, for the lady that you mentioned about, we for sure cannot give a diagnosis online. As PPDKenya, we are not authorized to give diagnosis, but it sure does sound like this is a mom who is struggling, because you mentioned she cut off her social circles, she's struggling. You mentioned there's the chance that you mentioned trauma in your question. So while we cannot give a diagnosis on here, we would recommend that you're able to access help. I don't know what like from the symptoms that you've mentioned that this woman is struggling. So we experience or her partner is not supportive. We for sure don't have all the information to speak to that experience. But it does sound like she's struggling, and we'd recommend for her to get help. Maybe you can get in touch with Katilia a little later and we can see, what options are available for where you're at. Then the second question you asked, that is there a drug that if not taken during pregnancy can trigger mental health in a child? What comes to mind for me is, I know folic acid is really recommended during pregnancy, and there are women who find it incredibly hard to take that. It's recommended because it helps the growing baby for their nervous system to develop well. So to the best of my knowledge, I know that if some drugs are not taken, they do cause, they might cause physical challenges in a child, but I'm not really sure I can speak to how they affect a child's mental health, because them taking folic acid or whatever drugs it is that they need to take are really for the physical development of the baby. So we might not be able to offer like information on this baby that hasn't been born as far as their mental health is concerned. I don't know, I hope that answers your question. Jacinta, I see you'd asked about an hour ago. Jacinta had asked for postpartum depression, what triggers it? I don't know, you might have come in after we've covered that slide, I'm not so sure. But we mentioned some of the factors that increase the risk of getting postpartum depression. So we looked at the socioeconomic factors. So if a mom has had a mental health condition before, whether it be depression before she gave birth or became pregnant, that increases the risk of postpartum depression. For moms who experience drastic hormonal changes as well, reactions to like family planning methods. So you use a family planning method and it affects your mood, or you bleed out a lot, or you have very severe PMS symptoms. Those are some of the risk factors. So just to also make it clear, because she mentions about what triggers it, these factors vary from mom to mom. So there are moms who will actually get postpartum depression, because maybe their birth experience wasn't all that great, or they have these reactions to hormonal changes during like when they're using family planning methods, or during they had a complicated pregnancy. So all these are factors which might actually, increase the risk of a mom getting postpartum depression. But what we've seen in our work and what research has shown, there's no one single cause of postpartum depression. All these factors that I'm getting a lot of feedback, Atila. I don't know whether it's on your end as well. But I was all these factors just increase the risk of a mom getting postpartum depression. There's not one single thing. I like to tell people, like, we say malaria is caused by mosquitoes, but we don't have the same for mental health conditions. There are moms who will have challenges, will have a very hard birth experience, but for some reason they're able to bounce back. Then we'll have a mom who probably had complications, or her baby had to go to NICU and she might not be able to cope too well. So there's no one single cause for it, but the risk factors that we've mentioned have a role to play with within moms. I hope that answers your question, Jacinta.
Thank you for that, our speaker. I think Jacinta is answered. So the chat box, I can just see some comments from Barry. Thanks a lot. The session was great. It was commendable from Gabriel. Anilika, thank you so much for your response, and you are wonderful. So I think that's all from the participants. If you don't have any other question, for me, the session was well done and well presented, and I'm so happy. And I hope with this knowledge, we can be able to differentiate between PPD and psychosis and other forms of depression during pregnancy and after, mostly after pregnancy. So I appreciate so much our speaker, and on behalf of the team and the participants, thank you so much for Postpartum Depression Kenya. And for the participants, you can always follow Postpartum Depression Kenya in their social media platforms. I think the speaker shared the links. You can follow and you can catch up and have a chat with the speakers, or maybe if you are something that you may want to speak one-on-one with the speaker for peer support, you can also reach out to her. I really appreciate so much. Maybe back to you for your parting shot.
Thank you, everyone, for listening. First of all, I think we all have a role to play in making sure that moms get the support that they need. We have a role to play in making sure that we reduce the stigma that is associated with mental health. We don't usually tell people who have diabetes or malaria or cancer that you can just get over it. We don't tell them if you just prayed hard enough, you'd be okay. So we are slowly dismantling that and just giving moms and their families a safe space to say, you know what, I'm a mother and I'm struggling. Where can I get help? I'm a mother and I'm struggling. Who can I talk to? So we're slowly just getting to that space. And I'm very grateful for awareness campaigns and sessions like this, because if all of us took away something about maternal mental health and shared it with two other people, then you're looking at the impact of this session, not just being here, we're looking at it expanding within our circles, within the people that we're interacting with. So thank you very much for listening. I really do appreciate your time. And to Katile and her team, thank you for organizing this. Please go follow us on our social media pages. Talk to us, share with moms who are in your circles, share with your mommy friends, with your relatives. We'd really be glad just to slowly get the ball rolling as far as mom's mental health is concerned. So thanks everyone for listening. I think that is it from me, Katile.
Let's continue promoting and educating the youths near us on matters to do with postpartum depression and psychosis. I know we have learned, but we have now a task to go and reach out to others and make them aware of what we have learned. So I really appreciate so much our speaker, and I hope we'll use this knowledge to help others also. Thanks so much and have a good evening, everyone.
Thank you, Katile. Thank you, everyone. Bye and good night.